the dedication reads something along the lines of for my two grandsons who were born in times when the unimaginable was daily news, with hope for the future. So that's all there is. We must remain hopeful.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hi, everyone, and welcome to I Have Something to Say after a very short hiatus because we've been crazy busy. I'm happy to be back, and today we have as our guest Dr. Luis Martínez-Fernández. We became fast friends in this 2-week hiatus, and he's a historian, university professor, nationally syndicated columnist. He has his own firm also. He's a consultant, public speaker, just a powerhouse of knowledge in everything that has to do with international affairs, Latin America, the Caribbean, education, U.S. Latinos, on and on and on. And today I want to give him a big, big, big welcome. Bienvenido, Dr. Martínez-Fernández. How are you?
Thank you very much, Sami, for this space in your program. I'm doing great. Happy to be here in your program.
And I feel like when we first met, it's like we had this long conversation, and it was a deep, fun conversation. I've been following and reading your articles too, which I have to say, Dios mío, it's like I always laugh so hard because your wit, the way you present the most, sometimes even the most crazy of circumstances that you might think are menial, but then you start reading, you really go deep, and it's like, makes you ponder. And so I'm so happy to, take this moment to really talk about your latest work, because I love the title. It's your new book, When the World Turned Upside Down: Politics, Culture, and the Unimaginable Events of 2019 through 2022. And yeah, I'm all ears. I mean, I know it's a collection of essays, but tell me, how do you sort out what to include in the book, and what's your why? What was the big why in wanting to publish this work?
Yes, well, there's several whys. Many of us had to reinvent ourselves during the pandemic. So at the time, 2019, right before the pandemic, 2020, I was thinking that there's so many crucial matters happening in today's world that I should repurpose my pen because, as you said, I'm a historian. I usually write about the past. My previous book was on early colonial Cuba, but and actually I went back to my first love when I was a student at the University of Puerto Rico. Uh,
You be in the house. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, that's a place that gave me so much that I'm eternally grateful. And I imitated some of my professors who wrote columns. Some of your listeners may know Fernando Pico, the great historian
Mhm.
of Puerto Rico. But I stopped doing that when I came to this country because I was so busy working on my degree. But I retook that early passion back in 2019, and it started as individual columns. Then I had a number of them, and I said, well, maybe I can put them together in a creative way and publish them as a book. It was a lot of fun. The title of the book, which came out late in the game, usually the authors don't select the titles or the covers. But for this book, I worked on the cover concept and gave it the title When the World Turned Upside Down: Politics, Culture, and the Unimaginable Events of 2019 2022.
I love the intentionality behind it, right? And so what are some of the topics that that you address, and what are some, give us a hint, right? Of what you decided to include in this book.
Well, the key is how you package your work. I could have published them as they came out in chronological order, but that was not the best way of putting them together. So I decided to split them into chapters. There are 8 chapters. There's one dedicated actually to Puerto Rico with the subtitle the world's oldest colony. There's one on Cuba, there's one on Latinos in the United States, but most of the work really focuses on national and global issues. For example, there's a whole section in which I see echoes of the Civil War and the antebellum being played out in contemporary US politics. The parallels are just incredible. How similar circumstances are today as they were back in the 1850s, right? And early 1860s. There are some chapters, and by the way, um, as a columnist, I'm supposed to come up with a topic every week. Sometimes the headlines really dictate what I do. And the
Mm.
war in Ukraine, of course, shifted my attention to global developments there. The possibilities, God forbid, of World War III. And some of, as you said earlier, some of them are lighter. And I have fun selecting the titles. There's one, politicians carry copies of the Constitution and they like to wave them. And I gave the title to one of my columns, Is That a Constitution in Your Pocket? So I have a lot of fun.
I know you do, and it's really really fantastic to read your work because there's a lot of depth there, but also it makes one see, right, all of the angles, and also sometimes in many cases the absurdity, right, of
Yeah.
the times we're living in. When you mention that there are so many parallels between
Yes.
today and how society is functioning and the mindsets with the 1800s, that's both interesting and scary, and so in many ways I think that it's you're kind of like a physician of modern times because you're constantly keeping your fingers on the pulse of what's going on, and then conveying this perspective that really um provide some, how do you say, some time to ponder on it, but then also some sense of humor for it, because otherwise we'll go crazy, right? If you don't embed, estabas diciendo before, ¿verdad? Que como es río para no llorar, I laugh so I don't cry, right? And it's a common saying in Puerto Rico. And so I know that you accompany the essays with visual representations, or posters, if you will. Um, why? I know that you dabble in graphic design, that you, well, more than dabble. They're pretty awesome posters, actually. And so tell me, when did you find, that you had this inclination, for the arts too?
Well, I appreciate that. Going back to the University of Puerto Rico, it was such a stimulating environment where students in the humanities would take courses in the graphic arts, in art appreciation, music, literature, of course. So all of those things, that those sensitivities towards art, which I developed while a student, um, years later, it's like another language, Sami. um I I I, there were so many incredible things that were happening that I was motivated. One of the earliest ones is because they have images and then they have some statement, and one of the early ones in 2017 was, and how do we shame the shameless? So these are ideas that I get I write columns, and oftentimes I have an accompanying. I call them editorial poster, um, and just it's another, as I said, another language, another way of representing yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, and writing is an art. I think sometimes people get really focused on defining art as painting, or it's like what they most commonly feel is art, right? And they forget sometimes that it's even traditions, customs, the way we dress,
Yeah.
anything that really expresses our humanity, right? And so then to see that in your career, and you know, you're a very accomplished, right, writer, professor, lifelong student, right? Because you're constantly digging and researching. Even with your consulting firm now, you know that you've reinvented yourself. That's what you really want to focus on, is research and seminars and speaking engagements to really broaden the understanding of especially, right, Latino America and diverse
Mhm.
cultures and all of that. And so how has that transition been of like really developing other ways of art, right, aside
Mhm.
from writing? You know, the
Yeah.
posters and the speaking and all of that is art, no?
I'm glad you used the word art. The great Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca once said that it's the art of writing is putting two words together that people wouldn't think that they go together, but somehow there's magic in the process. So, writing is a process that requires a lot of editing and revisiting and revisiting. Um, I am a historian. I'm from the Caribbean, as you are, and my writing reflects that. There's a rhythm to my writing. There's a sense of humor that I try to get away with. Even in an encyclopedia of Cuba, which is supposed to be the most serious of all genres, I was able to slip that in. Basically, and people who know me say, "Well, Luis, you write like you speak." And I appreciate that as a compliment because, as you know, Sami, there's some people who wear masks and pretend things and say one thing but believe another. Uh, that's not a way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talk to me about your beginnings, right? Like where did you grow up? How did you take this career path? What led you to also migrate, right, to the US mainland? And what are you doing now? Like, you know, I know that you impact students as well.
Well, my question was going to be how much time do we have? I know time is limited, but I like to say that I became a historian uh, in 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 middle school. Actually, even before that, in primary school, I was born in Cuba in 1960. That was the second year of the revolution. My family had to leave because of the mounting authoritarianism and human rights abuses. It's interesting that scholars who study Cuba see no wrong in the Cuban Revolution, as if all of the atrocities that have happened never happened. But as a Cuban, uh, the revolution really reshaped our lives. I mean, we were forced to live in a place that we were not born into. Um, so uh, by the age of 10, I had lived through exile. My family passed through the refugee center in Miami, Freedom Tower. Then we went, of all places, to Lima, Peru, where I lived for 8 years, and I became a little Peruvian kid. I still love Peruvian food; it's my favorite. And then in 1968, there was a military coup. And I remember, and these are things that really mark you as an 8 year old watching on TV as the democratically elected president is being hauled away from his bedroom by soldiers, and he's wearing his pajamas, his glasses were dangling. Those are images that force you to try to find answers to all of these questions. And then we migrated to Puerto Rico, where I grew up. So it's all of these life experiences that sort of pushed me to become a historian, because history is largely autobiographical. And then I ended up writing about topics that pertain to those experiences.
Wow, that's awesome. And so, how did you land here in Orlando?
Good question. Uh, I left Puerto Rico in 1986.
Oh, wow.
Some people say that you shouldn't use the term migrate when you come from Puerto Rico to the United States. And I say, well, yes, you should, because even though we have the American passport, everything else is the experience of a migrant. You leave home, everything that is familiar to friends and family. So I came to this country to pursue a doctorate at Duke University, and then I taught different places, mostly in the Northeast. And in 2004, there was an opportunity. I saw an ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education. They were hiring somebody to run Latin American Studies program at UCF. And as you know, almost everybody from Puerto Rico has family here. I
Yeah.
came here delighted. A few of my classmates from Puerto Rico were here, family members. So I've been here since 2004 at UCF.
At the University of Central Florida. Yeah, and that's so funny because that's the same year I moved here to Central Florida in 2004. Yeah, so our
Yes.
Florida experience, right, started at the same time. Yeah, that's really cool. And so how's that, have you seen this transformation of the student body? I mean, because I think in that time,
Yeah.
UCF has become a Hispanic serving institution. I think it reached that threshold just recently in the last, what, 8 years or something like that.
Probably 4 or 5. Yes.
4 or 5.
Um,
Okay.
one of the things that attracted me to Central Florida is that I saw Orlando, Greater Orlando, Central Florida, as a laboratory of a future of Hispanic America in this country, and different from the experiences in the Northeast or the Southwest or the West. This is something new. And I started writing about the frontier. I see Orlando as a frontier for immigrants, and I'll tell you why. Uh, uh, you know that Puerto Rico can be quite hierarchical and
Yes.
um, closed in many ways. So, for people who are not from those ruling families or those fancy last names, who didn't go to the fancy high schools, we find in Orlando a frontier where it's egalitarian. I don't care if you studied at this fancy school or not. We're here. We're all frontiersmen and frontier women. I have a good friend who told me a story. He has a Basque last name, and he was coming to Orlando from Puerto Rico. He told that to a friend, and he said, "Why are you going there? Here in Puerto Rico, you are a Gastambide, and in Orlando, you're nobody." Which is it's a nice way of putting that. There is a frontier here, and we reject those who come from the island and sort of want to continue with those hierarchies. Not here.
Yes. It doesn't work. And it's interesting too, right? Because we see the migration also from the Northeast, people that who also identify as Puerto Rican. And so it's such a interesting dynamic to see all of those
Yeah.
perspectives converge, right? And oftentimes clash too, right? And so I'm sure that, you marvel at it. You've written, about it as well. But also, how do you see that reflected in the student body that's now has is now, rich in terms of Latino background?
Yes, from the time I came here, 2004 to today, there has been an incredible rise in the Latino population, most of them Puerto Ricanos, at the University of Central Florida. I don't have the numbers with me, but I can tell you, I teach every year a history of Puerto Rico course, and it's always well attended. It, not just Puerto Ricanos, but other students who come to learn about the island and its diaspora. I also teach Cuban history. So there's a lot of interest, and the student body is growing. Our Hispanic population at the university is growing very rapidly.
That's fantastic. And so I wanted to just invite everybody that's here in Central Florida or in Florida, because it's worth the drive, to really experience one of your lectures and presentations. You will be presenting the book, right?
Yeah.
On April 6th at 7 p.m. at the University of Central Florida in the DeVos Family Room, correct? Is there one specific faculty or part of the
It's
campus?
it's actually at the Dr. Philip Center for Performing Arts.
Oh, look at that. My bad. So awesome. Okay. That's
And
actually that's easier to navigate because finding parking at UCF is like finding a needle in a haystack, quite
it is.
frankly.
It is.
Yes, so that's actually better. So clearly I haven't been to the DeVos family room at the Dr. Phillips because I didn't know where that was. But that's great. So at the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center on Thursday, April 6th, so that'll be a week from now, exactly at 7 p.m. And it's for free. Fantastico.
It's for free. They recommend that you register. So
Yes.
if you visit the page, UCF Celebrates the Arts, you're going to see
Yes.
all of the events that are happening.
Well,
And what
we'll
I'm doing,
include, yeah, we're gonna include the link in the description, of this podcast to make sure people can easily access it. And so I think that's fantastic. So you're gonna go over some of the essays and also showcase some of the posters.
yes, this is the third presentation of my book so far. It just came out in February. And every time I like to do something different. So what I'm doing now, I've made a selection of about 20 of the editorial posters to which I allude in the essays. So I will show the posters. It's a PowerPoint presentation, and then have some readings of the pertinent parts from the book. I will also have a display of some of those editorial posters, and some of them are quite fun.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's so fantastic. And I'm assuming books are gonna be there. You're gonna be able to sign them. And how are your students showing up? I could imagine they must be loving it, right?
Well, let me tell you, one of the greatest satisfactions in life is to work with young minds and see them develop. And that's what the university is about, opening the world of possibilities for them. And so some of them come to those events. Actually, yes, a few of them have said that they want to join that night.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna make it my business to be there. And I'm excited. I'm excited. We've had wonderful conversations. So I'm really looking forward to hearing you actually present and speak. I know I'm gonna learn a lot, and so this is very exciting. And I'm so glad that we met. That we were able to break bread together and spend some time together to learn about your work and also to have you come over and see, the work that we're doing with Casa Culture. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to publicly thank you for reviewing the grant that we submitted for Casa Culture. You were just so open and generous and spot on with the suggestions that you made. And so I thank you so much for just being un compadre de la comunidad, right? A comrade in the community, and wanting to really find the resources, right, to elevate our community, because I know that's what you're all about.
Yes, one of the defining characteristics of Hispanics, Latinos, is our generosity. Generosity with time, generosity with knowledge, generosity with connections. And I know you do a lot of this, bringing people together and elevating them with your projects for artists. So it's
Yeah.
just if we don't
And
help each other, Sami, nobody else will.
absolutely. And I feel like as I hear you speak, you know what the visual came to mind? My abuela, mama, my grandmother, mama. That generosity
Mhm.
is displayed in la olla, right?
Mhm.
Because she didn't have much, but she could cook some mina arroz con gandule. And I gotta tell you, she every morning she would, get ready and cook a big pot. And I'm like, who's coming? And she's like, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Because when people showed up, they were gonna get fed, right? And so
Yeah,
then
and
that's how that generosity is displayed, right, at the very granular level in our community, and we learned that it's embedded in the way
it
we
is.
operate. Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts and your art and your words, right, with the world. I'm very much looking forward to getting my book, reading the book, and really enjoying your presentation. And so, any last words regarding, what we should be pendiente or observant of, in your analysis of this world turning upside down?
Well, I dedicated the book to my two grandsons, and the dedication reads something along the lines of for my two grandsons who were born in times when the unimaginable was daily news, with hope for the future. So that's all there is. We must remain hopeful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. It's such a blessing to know you.
Well, same here, Sami. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU.